Howdy folks, Spencer here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at and reviewing the Excelsior 2 Intel Heavy Cruiser. Before I get too far into things, chapters are listed down below if you would like to skip ahead to other parts of the review. So I'm going to start off here with the origin of the ship canon-wise and how it's going to be available to us in STO. This ship is a modernized take on the Excelsior that appeared in Season 2 of Star Trek Picard. It is taking elements of the Excelsior and mixing it with the Sovereign class. And if you look around the ship, you can really see some elements of both. And it's a much larger ship than the existing Excelsior versions. If you look at them side by side, for example, the hole under the ship where this ends is where the saucer ends on the normal Excelsiors. So it's a much larger hole to the ship than existed with the previous Excelsior versions. And that is going to impact the customization options that you have with this ship, unfortunately. Now, with regards to how the ship is available within STO, it is unfortunately a lockbox ship in the Infinity lockbox. So this was added to the Infinity lockbox on December 6th, 2022 for those of us on PC, and it will be added over on console sometime later in December or early in January of 2023. Now, being a lockbox ship, it is also available on the player exchange, and the demand for this ship has been extremely high. High enough to the point that it is actually causing some of the other lockbox ships to go up in value to normalize with the impact that this has had on the market. So it's a ship that you can acquire via the exchange if you don't want to gamble. And the current rates of it have been going between 1.3 to 1.4 billion EC. So it is a fairly expensive ship, but that is one free to play accessible option for you to get it. The other way that you can freely access the ship is via the event campaign that will be starting up in 2023. The event campaign 4 that is currently running in 2022 will not have this ship listed as an option. However, event campaign 5 that starts in 2023 will have this ship as an option from the premium T6 Starship Choice pack that event campaign has. So if you want this ship, you can get it completely for free from the event campaign box in 2023 and any further event campaigns that they run. Now let's head on over and take a look at the customization options this ship has. Okay, so over at the customization side of things, the Excelsior 2 is sadly not compatible at all with any of the prior Excelsior skins, and I'll head over to the tailor to demonstrate that here in a moment. But the reason for it is because the hull of the Excelsior 2 is just so much larger than the hull on the previous versions of the Excelsior, and you can really see it in these two side by side here. Right here is the legendary Excelsior, and you see that the hull below the ship is very small. And you look at the Excelsior 2, it's very common with what you see on other ships like the Sovereign. Like I said before, to me, the Excelsior 2 is a mix between the Excelsior and the Sovereign class. Now, with regards to customization, the separation between these two does not carry over to just the skins currently. The Excelsior 2 can also not use the console that is exclusive to the Excelsior variants, the Tactical Maneuvering Matrix. It's not necessarily a great console, but the fact is, this is an Excelsior in name, so that should be able to use both of the prior Excelsior consoles if you wanted to. And unfortunately, that is not currently possible. Hopefully, they'll fix that in a future update. So let's head on over to the customization person here. And you see at the templates at the left, I can hit the Excelsior and that's it. If I hit advanced, There's no options at all for the hull, saucer, neck, pylons, nacelles, nothing with regards to their style. You could, of course, change the pattern on them, but you can do that on everything. With regards to materials, you do have a few options with this ship. By default here, it has the sagging material. And if I go and look at some of the others here, you have quite a few options. So here's the Defiant, which I think looks pretty decent. We'll go through these real quick. Here's the Galaxy. Here's the Intrepid. Here is the NX. Some of these do have a really neat color scheme, but the deflector there looks a bit rough. Let's take a look at the NX refit. It's not terrible. Let's take a look at the sagging again. This is what it comes with. So this is how it looks right out of the box, basically. Let's take a look at the Sovereign. I don't really like how the nacelles look with the Sovereign skins here. And you'll see it's the same thing with the refit Sovereign. That red glow right there just doesn't look great to me. I don't normally care about stuff like that, but to me that just does not really look good. So I think the sagging material, that's pretty good, but some of these other ones up top are also pretty nice. The older skins, there's some here that might look okay on it. 8B does actually look pretty good on it. So 8B is a newer skin that they have available to many ships. 7A also looks okay from a few angles, but this is all personal preference. Some of these older ones just really don't hold up too well nowadays. But I think the main point here is, this cannot be customized with the other Excelsiors. And if I go pull out the legendary Excelsior that I have, you'll see that it also cannot use anything from this new Excelsior. And there's no unique Excelsior interior here or anything like that if we're hoping for that. So let me grab the legendary Excelsior now. It's right here. The legendary Excelsior is available in the 11th anniversary bundle. It's not the most popular bundle, but I think it's got lots of interesting things in it. So this is the Repulse skin on the legendary. It's a very different take. Resolute, not a big fan of. Excelsior retrofit is what most of you are going to be used to. There's the Excelsior. And I think what really sucks the most with this is that you can't even go and use the older nacelles on the Excelsior too. I think for a lot of people, it would be, it'd go a long way if they could just give you access to at least the older nacelles. I understand that the hull on the Excelsior 2 is, significantly larger than the others, but I do think having access to those older style nacelles would help a lot of people accept this ship. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the stats, and I'm not going to go over every last stat number here because I already have done that in another video. I've also already done comparisons to other ships, so I will have my stats breakdown video linked at the top right. But I'm going to quickly recap the stats here. The Excelsior 2 is a 4-4 cruiser that is unable to equip dual cannons. What that means is that this ship is going to lean heavily in towards a beam playstyle. If you're somebody that likes beam arrays especially, this ship is going to excel for you. The consoles on this ship are 4 engineering consoles, 3 science, and 4 tactical. Of course, if you upgrade it to tier 6X, you can get an additional universal console. And it has 4 device slots right off the bat. You get a 5th one when you T6 exit. And for the bridge officer setup on this ship, you have a setup here that is going to allow you to run surgical strike setups, beam overload, fire at will. All of these builds I have talked about already in my build theory craft video, where I went over how to build out the different setups bridge officer wise. So I'll also have that linked at the top right. But to summarize the bridge officers here, you have a commander engineer with intel, a lieutenant commander science with miracle worker, a lieutenant commander tac, and a lieutenant commander universal. This ship does only have 4 bridge officers, so you are going to be missing out on having another superior Romulan operative bridge officer on your crew. However, it is still sufficient, and the layout of the ship is more than enough to handle the majority of content that, well, really any of the content that you would be taking it into. So it's a very solid setup for a beam-based build. And the ship does again have that limitation of being unable to equip dual cannons, which means if you do get the ship and if you're getting the ship for the ship itself, then you're going to be looking at a beam array setup or a dual beam bank setup where you have a set omni aft, a non-set omni, the kinetic cutting beam, and then you would have like a turret aft. So either a beam array setup like you see on the screen here that I have now, or a dual beam bank setup. And again, I have comparisons of this ship to other ships in my stats breakdown video, which I've already linked at the top right, and I'll also have linked down in the description below. Now let's head on over and take a look at the Starship Trait and console off of this ship. And for the Starship Trait, we have Calculated Broadside. Upon activating Fire at Will or Intelligence Bridge Officer abilities, for 15 seconds you will gain a 35% boost to your beam weapon damage. This is a Cat 1 damage boost. By Cat 1, that means that it is a base damage boost, so it is very small. It is slightly less than the damage boost you would get from a single TAC console. And we also have plus 30 damage resistance rating along your side arcs, which is doubled if in threatening stance. And if you're not in threatening stance, it's going to lower your threat generation by 60%. So this trait is not worth using. And the reason for that is because of the uptime on it. You see, it has a 15-second duration there, but it has a 10-second downtime after that with that lockout. So this is unfortunately not a trait that you should be using. Even if you get the Excelsior 2, it just is not good enough. It's got 15 seconds of uptime and then 10 seconds where it's on lockout. It just isn't worth it when you consider some of the other trait options out there. Now, some of those other trade options would be things like supercharged weapons. I imagine that most of you that are building this ship out are probably going to have a torpedo on it. And supercharged weapons is going to excel and to be a much better trait in those scenarios. Let's compare these side by side. Calculated Broadside has a 60% uptime, for which, in that 60% uptime, you can get a 35% damage boost for beam weapons. And if we look at supercharged weapons, which, by the way, is a C-Store Starship trait, it's off of the Tactical Odyssey, Scimitar, Board Askew. It's very accessible, given the amount of ships it's on. That trait can stack up to 3 times when you fire torpedoes. And if you look at the full boost you get with all 3 stacks, that is 30% damage for any energy weapons on your build, so beams or cannons, first 35% on Calculated Broadside, and then, rather than getting some resistance and minus threat gen, you're getting crit chance and severity, up to 4.5% crit chance and up to 20% crit severity for your energy weapons. So supercharged weapons is just a much better trait, and the issue for Calculated Broadside is the uptime and then the damage boost just not being enough. I think calculated broadside, if they got rid of this 10-second recharge on it, if they got rid of that and then they increased the weapon damage boost here, then it could be a little bit better. But this current implementation with this 35% boost, just it's not enough. They need to go through and address the downtime on it. And at the same time, I do think that increasing the damage bonus from it would be beneficial and would make people want to use this. So I would love to be able to say that the trait is good, but unfortunately in the current state, the trait simply sucks. So hopefully they can go through and address some of those issues and make the trait better. But really, if you're getting the Excelsior 2, the summary of what I just said there is you're not getting it for the trait, because the trait isn't going to be worth running even if you have the ship. And now we're at the fun part of this ship, the part that most of you have been waiting for, the console, the experimental power redirection. This console does a few things, and I'll go over each of the nice perks it has here. But let's start off with the passives on it. So it has two passives. The first is 19.9% increased energy damage. That is a Cat 1 damage boost. And then plus 13.3 Starship Weapon Amplification, which amounts to 5.32% crit severity. So not the biggest passives in the world, but better than some of the other ones out there. And the clicky here does a few different things. The first part of it is that you're getting a large damage boost for the 15 seconds that the console is active. And this is a damage boost for your energy weapons that is going to scale up with your total engine, shield, and auxiliary power levels. And you can get this to go up quite high, especially if you stack things like override subsystem safeties with it. I was also going through and using some duty officers like 19 of 47 and 24 of 47. 19 has a chance when you hit engineering bridge officer abilities to increase your power levels to maximum, and 24 does the same thing but for tactical abilities. So both are very good DOFs, and if you're using this ship or any other Miracle Worker ships or ships with Miracle Worker seating, then you may want to take a look into these duty officers because they're pretty good. So the first part of it there is that damage boost based on how much power you have in non-weapon subsystems. And you can get that up pretty high. I've seen people already getting it up to like 110%. So it scales up quite well if you have the stuff on your build to boost those other power levels. Now, just a reminder though, that you don't want to take away from your weapons power. And just a short tangent here. There's a lot of you that are still running balanced power levels. I look at Twitch and like 90% of people I see playing this game are on the balanced power levels. Hit the attack power levels. Just hit the attack preset and always make sure to hit that. That is going to massively bump up the damage that your weapons do. And STO is a game about doing damage. Like the only thing that really matters at the end of the day with combat is how fast you can kill the enemy. Boosting up survivability is nice, but STO is a game where the best defense is a strong offense. Kill the target before they have a chance to kill you. Increase your attack. Hit the attack preset so you boost up your weapon power so that your weapons kill the damn thing before it has a chance to kill you. It's as simple as that. So, you can boost this up, but don't sacrifice your weapon power to try and boost it up. That just wouldn't make sense. The loss and damage from lowering your weapon power would not be counteracted by the damage boost that you would get from boosting that up further. So that's a really good damage boost right there, and that That damage boost is why this console is probably going to be meta for especially like ISA cannon scatter volley runs. If you're somebody that likes to do DPS runs in normal or elite or normal or advanced content, then that damage boost is going to last for a significant chunk of the combat. So that's a pretty sizable boost and might be something to consider right there. Now, the second perk of this console is that if your beams do not currently have a firing mode on, it will randomly apply Beam Overload 3 or Fire at Will 3 to them. So you can have situations where if you have like a misfire or downtime between activation of your firing mode, where this console can come in and give you a firing mode for a brief duration. Now, if you're using something like surgical strikes, then it's not going to override surgical strikes in my testing. The only way that this showed up on a parse while I was using surgical strikes, for the part where it gives my beams beam overload or fire at will, was if my surgical strikes had misfired or there was downtime between my surgical strikes activations. So don't expect that second part to really do that much for you. And then the third bit is that it fires out a bunch of phaser beam arrays, auxiliary phaser beam arrays, with the Overload at Will 3 ability. So these are completely separate beam arrays from what are on your ship, and by default, they will fire 4 shots per second. And as you get kills while the console is active, it can scale up. This does mean that this console works best on builds that are AoE based. So Fire at Will and Cannon Scatter Volley are going to be able to take advantage of this console the most. However, even with a Surgical Strikes build or Beam Overload, you should still be able to boost it up a little bit, and you'll find that especially if you're on a phaser based build, this console is probably going to be a nice damage boost for you. And if you can really boost it up to get the 14 shots out per second, it looks amazing. I'm gonna play a clip from a Herc TF or not Herc, the home mission that I did. So let me find the parse for it. I was at 324. Here we go. So I'm going to go into the first part of home, and you're going to see that the only thing that I activate is the console. I boost it up with a bunch of damage boost, and then I decloak and I hit them. With just the console, my actual beams are not firing. This is just the console here. You see, as it's getting more kills, it fires faster and faster. Let me play that again. So visually, the console looks really amazing. It's shooting out these really powerful phaser beams out of your ship. The damage from them is going to largely be mediocre. Like, they're not going to hit as hard as your normal beam arrays, but they hit hard enough to kill a lot of the smaller mobs. So if you do use the console, my recommendation would be to try and use it at points where there's a large group of enemies. If you use this against, just a couple of enemies, you're not going to get much out of it. But if you use it up against like a group of 10 enemies and it starts to get kills, then it's going to stack up extremely well and do a lot in that 15 seconds. Now, I think 15 seconds for this buff is good, but I do think that it wouldn't hurt to increase it to 20 seconds, because by the time you max the console out, it's basically done. So I think a couple seconds once we've finally been able to max it out would be a bit more enjoyable. The console is fun to use as is, and I'll attach some more footage of me going in and doing some stuff with it. But I do think if it was increased to 20 seconds, it would be, even better. But overall for the console, meta wise, I don't think it's going to necessarily be seen on every like high-end elite build. The thing to keep in mind with this is that this excels in scenarios where you can get lots of kills very quickly, and that is mostly going to be in normal or advanced content. In elite, you're going to have a hard time getting this console to fully stack up. So I would just keep in mind that this console, while good, is something that's going to lean more towards those situations where you have either an AoE build or there's just a lot of really small, low HP mobs around you. It can still work in Elite. It's not going to do as well in Elite as it would in those situations where, it can get kills faster. So overall, it's a really fun console. I'll attach footage of it to show you right after I finish talking about it here. I do think that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to pick this ship up just for this console, and I do think it's worth it. I think the console's really fun. I think if you're a phaser beam array user, this is a console that is going to be very immersive and add a bit to your build. So I don't see the price of the Excelsior coming down anytime soon, so long as this console is as good as it is. Let's go take a look at some of the footage, and then I'm going to give you my summary on the ship. Okay, just a quick edit and post here. I realized that in that entire segment that I just did talking about the console, I forgot to mention how it actually performed when we looked at the combat logs. And when I look at the combat logs, it's not always spectacular, to be brutally honest with you. On average, I would say I was getting about 1 million damage per activation of the console. But the important thing to keep in mind with this is that if you're not boosting it up, if you're not getting kills while it's active, then the damage from it's always going to be lower. And if you're going into something like Elite, you're not going to get the kills like you would in normal or advanced to really boost it up. So don't expect it to do as well in harder content, and just don't expect it to be like the top performer on your build. The thing that I'm going to emphasize here really is, just keep in mind that this console is doing multiple things outside of the damage boost, or outside of the beams firing from it. Like, it's giving you a damage boost. It's giving you fire at will or beam overload if you don't have those active. Like, it's doing multiple things, and depending on your build, you're still going to want to slot it, even if you aren't getting that much damage from it. So just keep that in mind when you're going through and looking at parses of this thing. It does decent damage, but it's nothing spectacular. But I think it's enough damage that between that and the damage boost and the other boost that it provides, that you're still going to want to consider it. Now, I'm going to head back over to all of the footage of it in action, so enjoy, and then my summary will be on right afterwards. Okay, so I know in Triz's video on the Excelsior 2, he went into Kier, and I think that was a good choice to really show off the console here, so I'm going to do the same thing, and we're going to go in on Kier Advanced solo and just see how the ship handles, see how it does, and we're going to see the visual experience that the console provides. So first thing, when you're in the ship like this, you got to turn on your weapon system efficiency the first time you load into the map. I'm going to hit my Kobayashi Maru, get a few buffs out of it. Didn't really get anything good there, but I'm going to head on over towards the side here. Now I'm running surgical strikes on this, so surgical strikes will be a little bit messy, but I think it'll still be perfectly fine. Okay, I'm gonna start to buff up. Here's the console. Keep in mind this is on a lower difficulty, but it's just so damn good. It sounds so good, just visually. Visually, that console looks amazing, and the performance from it, like especially in a scenario like this where you can get a lot of kills really fast, it just does exceptionally well. Okay, I gotta protect the gang. Now just gotta clean up this left side. I'm gonna save the console for the end. I have it backed up because of uncon. So this is definitely a console too. The more you can have it up, the more you're gonna benefit from it. So if you can run uncon on your build, it's a very good idea to do so. I'm gonna cloak back up. Bad timing, that pop-up just decloaked me. Gotta wait for the last wave to spawn in. Here we go. There's the console. Very immersive. Of course, you know, this isn't the fastest way to do solo Kier. You know, I'm running a beam array based surgical strikes build that's really themed with phaser beams and the wide angle quantum. But you know, it works well. And the console just absolutely melts things. So there's your visual of the ship and the visual of the console, especially once it starts to really kick off.
Yes, since yours failed in a spectacular fashion. Has it? Some might argue it succeeded beyond.
And time for the summary. So the Excelsior 2 is most certainly the best Excelsior that is currently in STO. But the issue with it is that you can't use any of the existing Excelsior pieces with it. So if you get this, you are stuck to the visuals of the revamped Excelsior. You can't use the classic skins on it, unfortunately. So that is going to be a major roadblock and going to push some of you away that are hoping or that were hoping to use the other Excelsior skins. Now, for the ship itself, it's a really good 4-4 cruiser. The setup on it is really fun to use if you build it outright. I was enjoying it the most with a surgical strike setup, and I tried it with beam arrays, dual beam banks, and I ended up settling on this beam array themed setup where it's mostly, normal looking beam arrays and then the wide angle quantum. This was just a really fun setup to me. It's not necessarily max DPS, but it worked very well, as you saw in some of the footage, and was just a blast to fly. Like it was a really fun change of pace compared to doing some of the higher end deeps builds, and it's fun to go back and just mess around with a classic beam array setup like this every now and then. Now, the trait on this ship very much needs some tuning. The lockout on it just really kills it, to be honest. And the damage boost from it, even if they nuke that lockout, I think the damage boost still isn't enough, considering that this is only boosting beam weapon damage. I think if it was boosted to 50 to 60%, and then they got rid of that lockout, then this would be a trait that you could consider on a beam build. But in its current implementation, it's a hard pass on the trait. And even if you get the ship, I wouldn't recommend using it. Now, for the console is a blast. At the end of the day, it may not always be the top parsing thing for you, but it does provide multiple buffs. So, don't look at a parse and see that it only did like 1,000,000 damage and be sad about it. Remember that while it's active, it's also giving you a fairly sizable damage boost for your energy weapons. So the console's really good. If you're somebody, especially that uses like a phaser beam array setup or like a phaser, any type of phaser energy weapon setup, this console's probably going to be something that you might want to consider. And I think if you have the budget for it, I do think it is just a really fun console to pick up for a phaser build. If you're someone that does ISA DPS runs, this also might be something to consider for the energy weapon damage boost on it. I imagine you can do the math to see if that's worth it for you or not, but in a really time compressed environment, that is a pretty large damage boost there. And the damage that you get from the clicky can also really stack up if you're able to get lots of kills quickly. So overall, the Excelsior 2 is going to end up being one of my top recommendations for Event Campaign 5 next year. If I didn't already have the Excelsior, it would be something that I would consider for next year. But my pick is, for me personally, is probably going to end up being the Sagan or the Stargazer command cruiser. But I do very much see that there's going to be a lot of you picking this ship up next year because it's a fun ship. The trait from it sucks, but the console on it is just absolutely amazing for phaser-based builds. So, really fun ship, really fun console, mediocre trait that needs some tuning. That's my review. I know it's a lockbox ship. I know it's expensive, but if I look at it from, what does the ship offer, then I have to say that it is a very fun ship. I've enjoyed flying it, and I'll continue flying it for the near future. And the console, I foresee myself using this console on quite a few builds moving forward. So that's going to be it for the review. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below. But it is getting a bit late for me here, so we're going to wrap things up. Once again, thank you to all channel members and viewers for the continued support. More Stowe vids and streams are coming soon. That's going to be it for today. Thank you for watching. See you guys next time.